I want to go back to Daniel's prophecy of Nebuchadnezzar's dream in Daniel 2. The dream of the ancient Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar's dream of an idol with a gold head, silver chest and arms, bronze thighs, iron shins, iron and clay foot, and 10 toes, and the foot is smitten by the stone that falls from heaven, and the rest of idol is made as chaff which is blown in the wind, and that stone become a great mountain which encompassed the earth. The declaration of the kingdom of God, the eternal kingdom brought about by second coming of the Christ, the stone that smites the foot of statue of Nebuchadnezzar, the conquest of the fourth kingdom by the fifth kingdom. So with this we know the stone that falls from heaven and establish the kingdom of God, which is the eternal kingdom, is Christ's second coming to the earth as a lion to reclaim it from the devil. Now then, the prophecy of Daniel. Daniel proceeds to explain that the metals represent 4 successive kingdoms, each being less prestige than the previous but increasing strength. The kingdom of Babylon is the head of gold, Daniel 2:28-40,605 BC to 539 BC. Scripture image of ancient Babylon. The Medes and Persian, Daniel 5:22-31, Achmedic Empire is the silver chest and arms, 539 BC to 331 BC. The Greeks are bronze thighs, Daniel 8:3-25, Daniel 10:3-20, 331 BC to 168 BC. The iron shins is the Roman Empire, which is identified in Daniel 7. The division of the Western Roman Empire and rise of the Vatican, the only church-state in history, is a unique historical event that took place in 476 AD leading into the Middle Ages. This is how the fourth kingdom is identified. In Daniel 7, 4 beasts representing 4 kingdoms, Babylon, Media, Persia, Greeks. On the fourth beast kingdom are 10 horns, where there are 3 horns that are plucked up by a little horn, whom speaks great words against the Most High God. This refers to when the Western Roman Empire is divided by 10 Germanic tribes, 3 of them fall, and the rise of the Vatican. The little horn speaking great words against the Most High God is the Vatican, which is located in Italy, which was part of the Roman Empire, identifying the Fourth Empire. The Roman Empire, 168 BC to 284 AD. The Roman Empire conquered the Greeks in 168 BC. Just some notable events that occurred. In 0 AD was Christ born. 33 AD he died and resurrected. Then in 70 AD was siege of Jerusalem. After that in 117 AD the Roman Empire reached its greatest in height. The Roman Empire was then split in half in the year 284 AD by Diocletian, a Roman general, as the Roman Empire became too large to govern for one man. So it was split in half. This is the fulfillment of the iron and clay foot part of statue of Nebuchadnezzar's dream, 284 AD to 476 AD. After Diocletian split the empire in half, he assigned 2 senior and 2 junior emperors of the 2 half of the empire, and then they fought against each other for control over the empire, with Constantine being the last emperor to control the whole empire. In 300 AD he legalized Christianity. Then by 476 AD the Eastern Roman Empire became known as Byzantine Empire, while the West was divided by 10 Germanic tribes. A list of the Germanic tribes: Franks, Alemanni, Visigoths, Suebi, Anglo-Saxon, Lombard, Burgundian, Ostrogoths, Heruli, Vandals. These 10 kingdoms are the 10 toes of the statue from Nebuchadnezzar's dream, Daniel 2. We then continue on in Daniel 7. The scripture talks about the division of the Western Roman Empire. Remember how the western half was divided by 10 Germanic tribes. These are the 10 horns of fourth beast of Daniel 7. Also how that there are 10 horns, and 3 are plucked up by the root by the little horn, speaking great words against the Most High God. And then it repeats, saying there are 7. Where there was 10 and a little horn. This is the Vatican, the only Christian church that in human history which is also a state in itself, and for its role in bringing pagans into church along with their ideas which are not from the Bible, and its history of teaching doctrine contrary to the Bible, their blasphemy against God such as purgatory or buying forgiveness, praying to saints, calling priest you Father when Christ commanded call only God you Father, changing the Sabbath from Saturday to Sunday, etc. Then after 476 and leading into the Middle Ages. The book of Revelation begins in the years 1492 at continuing the prophecy of King Nebuchadnezzar's dream. Transgen. Carrying on from Daniel to Revelation, the history of 7 kings lead to foot of the statue of Nebuchadnezzar's dream. The Middle Ages is the period of time from the division of the Western Roman Empire and rise of the Vatican. Daniel 7 prophecy 476 AD. What occurred between 476 and the rise of Islam 7th century to 10th century, the 10th to the 13th, the Crusades, bubonic plague, Renaissance, to 1492 AD. The Middle Ages came to an end when Christopher Columbus encountered the American continent in the year 1492 AD. This period of time is the division between Daniel's prophecy and Daniel 7476 AD, division of the Western Roman Empire and rise of the Vatican. The start of the Middle Ages, 476 AD to 1492 AD. Revelations start 1492 AD. Revelation starts after the end of the Middle Ages in 1492 AD. There are 3 notable events in the late 15th and early 16th century. Christopher Columbus' encounter with the American continent, marking the end of the Middle Ages and the start of Western colonialism. In the year 1492 AD, the revolution in warfare, the emergence of the musket, making traditional warfare obsolete in the early 16th century.
If you wanted to be running a modern state, one of the things you needed was an army that used gunpowder weapons.
Some reports of early handgunners and their weapons on and off the battlefield weren't always flattering. In 1453, one tells of cowardly gunners surrounding their victim, shooting him through the thigh, killing his horse, and then killing the rider as he fell to the ground. The handgunners hardly emerge with credit.
Nobody really knew quite what to do with it, and it was smelly, noisy, and certainly not a gentleman's weapon. A century later, though, the arquebus, an early form of musket, was more effective.
Improvements in its basic design and a much better ignition system suddenly gave the gun a much-needed technological shove in the back.
It was much easier to train somebody to use it. It took weeks, perhaps, as opposed to the years to produce a trained longbowman. Its explosion frightened men, and even more importantly, horses.
The 16th century battle scene depicted here shows mounted knights, protected by fine plate armor and with swords, attacking highly trained mercenary pikemen who would fight for either side if the money was right. And if it wasn't, they would change sides or simply go home. But when fighting, they were the best in Europe. Between the pikes are handgunners shooting lethally at point-blank range.
And it could produce a pretty ferocious effect on the battlefield. At Pavia, in 1525, Francis I of France took on an imperialist force of mixed arquebusiers and pikemen. He attacked them with cavalry, but couldn't actually get at the arquebusiers, who were in a strong position, protected by the pikes. Firing rapidly, they cut the French cavalry down in huge numbers, and about 8,000 were killed. So primitive though these weapons were, they could certainly have a pretty dreadful effect on the battlefield.
At the Battle of Pavia, in Italy, the cream of the French cavalry was slaughtered by the arquebus or musket operated by lowly infantry. It was a significant victory. It was one of the first times in a major European battle that firearms had been used in numbers to secure a conclusive victory in just over an hour. During the battle, the pikes protected the gunners as they reloaded and fired with devastating effect on the confused French cavalry, which charged them again and again, bravely but foolishly. There were 3,000 arquebusiers working closely with pikemen, moving quickly together around the battlefield in a partnership that combined the old, dependable spear technology with the new technology of gunpowder.
The deadly volleys of fire that crashed over the battlefields of Italy in the early 16th century announced that the gun had come of age. The ugly and awkward duckling of late medieval warfare had become a murderous Renaissance swan. Apparently quite suddenly, the cumbersome hand cannon had gone, and there had appeared something which we can recognize as a proper gun, with lock, stock, and barrel. A gun powerful enough to kill a man in full armor, accurate enough to take a heavy toll on the battlefield, and fast enough to match and rapidly replace the crossbow. But this was by no means the end of the story. Instead, the gun's sudden success unleashed an explosion of effort to make it even better, more reliable, more accurate, and faster shooting. In Europe, the age of the gun had arrived with a bang.
Now everyone wanted the best gun on the battlefield.
The Protestant Reformation in 1517 then we continuing on Revelation 6 KJV. Revelation 6 King James Version, KJV 6 And I saw when the Lamb opened one of the seals, and I heard, as it were the noise of thunder, one of the four beasts saying, Come and see. 2 And I saw, and behold a white horse, and he that sat on him had a bow, and a crown was given unto him, and he went forth conquering, and to conquer. The first seal the horsemen given a bow, crown, conquer to conquer. The bow is a musket. The bow is a reference to the emergence of firearms, musket, revolutionizing warfare, making traditional warfare obsolete in early 16th century. The Chinese invented gunpowder and used it in cannons. Then this technology made its way to Europe. Then they miniaturized it to hand cannons, and by the time of early 16th century, 1500s, they made an early form of musket revolutionizing warfare in the early 16th century. This is when firearms made traditional warfare obsolete, knights' spears, etc. This is what meant by given a bow. Note it. Called a bow because just as in Psalm 22 prophesied that Jesus' hands and feet pierced, and it was done via crucifixion, which did not exist when David wrote the psalm, so did not firearms, but because a musket fires a projectile and kill via a projectile which is aimed and shot like a bow. The emergence of early form of musket causing traditional warfare to become obsolete in early 16th century. The crown, the seven kings of the West and Roman Empire. The crown is a reference to the seven kings of the West and Roman Empire, Western Europe, from 476 AD. To conquer. In the year 1492, Christopher Columbus encountered the American continent. To conquer, the colonization of American, Pacific, Asian, African continent at the height of Western colonialism leading to World War I in 1914. Showing maps of Western colonialism over this period. Notable event in 1917, the Balfour Declaration of the British to create a Jewish homeland in Palestine. So the first seal, Western colonialism, period was 1492 AD to 1918 AD. Now then, in 1517 AD the Protestant Reformation began, and during the first seal Martin Luther purged the paganism from church, then the translation of the Bible and mass production of the Bible. Then the Christian missionary went everywhere. Colonialist powers went spreading Christianity all over the world. After the World War I, Western colonization began to taper off, the last bit being the Sykes-Picot Agreement to divide up the Middle East by the French and British, the former Ottoman Empire. Then the second seal, Revelation KJV 6:4, and there went out another horse that was red, and power was given to him that sat thereon to take peace from the earth, and that they should kill one another. And there was given unto him a great sword. At the end of the First World War, the Russian Revolution 1918, the rise of communism and its fall in 1991 AD, the Second Seal 1918 AD to 1991 AD, the rise of communism symbolized by the color red, given power to him, the rise of Soviet Union and took peace from the earth, revolutions, wars, conflict. Russia, China, Korea, Vietnam, etc. Single quote, The2 will try kill one another after the Second World War. Once again a world war started in Western Europe, as with the First World War, from 1947 to 1991. The Cold War between the USSR and the USA, which brought the world to the brink of nuclear war. The seven kings of the West and Roman Empire, Western Europe, allied with Israel and USA against the USSR, who was allied with Eastern Europe, as Europe was split between communist East and capitalist West. Seven kings of the West and Roman Empire, map of Europe 1947 to 1991. Now our sword. The first horsemen had about, remember, emergence of firearms revolutionizing warfare in early 16th, the musket, the second a sword. The first power will overcome second power, just like during the time of Western colonialism those with firearms trumped over those who used traditional warfare. Important note. After Second World War, Europe was split in half, the East and European countries allied with the USSR, while the seven kings of the West and Roman Empire, Western Europe, was allied with the USA. And 1948 had Israel. Then 1991 had the fall of the Soviet Union and the fall of communism, as communism roused with the USSR in 1918 and ended in 1991 with the USSR fall. Then in 1993 had the Warsaw Pact nations, allied with the USSR, joined the West and Europeans, forming the formation of the USA Alliance, the two beasts of Revelation 13, that reborn divided Roman Empire, physical manifestation symbolized as the dragon of Revelation 17, showing the relation between the Fourth Kingdom and Israel, and its support for 1948 had Israel. Note the seven heads, 10 horns, who carrieth the woman of Revelation 17 refers to West and European support for Israel. The Cold War 1947-1991. They are the same West and Europeans, seven kings of the West and Roman Empire, from Daniel 7, 10 horn, then 7 horn, 476 AD, division of the West and Roman Empire. The fulfillment of the woman on the dragon prophecy of Revelation 17. The return of Israel, the woman who is judged, then the conquest of the revived, divided Roman Empire, the Fourth Kingdom in the Battle of Armageddon in Israel, the fulfillment of Daniel 2, the Fourth Kingdom conquered by the Fifth Kingdom. The Christ's second coming, the establishment of the Fifth Kingdom, where Jesus defeats the Fourth Kingdom at the Battle of Armageddon in Israel, the end of the age. Back to the seals. Third seal 1991 ad TO 2001 ad globalization. The jobs of the West and European nations to the East and European nations, where wages are lower, and the USA to China. Fourth seal. 2001 AD 2014 AD. War, conflict. 9/11, Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, Syria, Yemen. Triggered by 9/11, the USA has launched a war of aggression attacking several countries: Afghanistan, Libya, Syria, Yemen.
see a guy at about 4,000 feet, about 5 east of your airport right now? Looks like he's... Yeah, that's him. That's another situation. What kind of airplane is that? Can you guys tell? I don't know. I'll read it out in a minute.
About 10 days after 9/11, I went through the Pentagon and I saw Secretary Rumsfeld and Deputy Secretary Wolfowitz.
This is not an Islamic act that was conducted.
So I went downstairs just to say hello to some of the people on the Joint Staff who used to work for me, and one of the generals called me in. He said, "Sir, you got to come in and talk to me a second." I said, "Well, you're too busy." He said, No. He says, "We've made the decision. We're going to war with Iraq." I said, "We're going to war with Iraq? Why?" He said, "Oh, sir," he says, "it's worse than that." He pulled up a piece of paper off his desk. He said, "I just got this memo from the Secretary of Defense's office that says we're going to attack and destroy the governments in 7 countries in 5 years. We're going to start with Iraq, and then we're going to move to Syria."
The Syrian government was responsible for this attack on its own people.
Lebanon, Libya,
We came, we saw, we died.
Somalia.
Now to the U.S. drone strike, taking out militants from the terror group Al-Shabaab in Somalia.
Sudan.
Leaders of South Sudan have to live up to their responsibilities.
And Iran.
The policy of the United States of America should be the overthrow of the mullah's regime in Tehran.
Fifth Seal Anti-Christian Persecution 2014 AD 0102 2018 AD Anti-Christian persecution surges worldwide. More anti-Christian persecution than ever before. Revelation 6 King James Version KJV 12 And I beheld when he had opened the 6th seal, and, lo, there was a great earthquake, and the sun became black as sackcloth of hair, and the moon became as blood. 13 And the stars of heaven fell unto the earth, even as a fig tree casteth her untimely figs, when she is shaken of a mighty wind. 14 And the heaven departed as a scroll when it is rolled together, and every mountain and island were moved out of their places. 15 And the kings of the earth, and the great men, and the rich men, and the chief captains, and the mighty men, and every bondman, and every free man, hid themselves in the dens and in the rocks of the mountains. 16 And said to the mountains and rocks, Fall on us, and hide us from the face of him that sitteth on the throne, and from the wrath of the Lamb. 17 For the great day of his wrath is come, and who shall be able to stand? Seal 6 Earthquake followed by lunar eclipse, the 31st of January, the 1st of February 2018.
Super blue blood moon will be visible in Colorado this week. Experts say on Wednesday, Denver will be one of the first cities in the U.S. to see what will be a combination of a supermoon, a blood moon, and a blue moon. That means the moon will be closer to Earth and brighter than normal. It will also take on a reddish tint and will be the second full moon in a month.
It's been about 5 years since major news outlets started hyping each and every supermoon. So it's understandable if you've stopped paying attention. Still, the one Wednesday, January 31st, may be worth your while. A supermoon is simply when the moon is full, while it's also closest to Earth. Technically, it's the biggest and brightest the moon can look, but it's hard to notice that difference with the naked eye. But this one will also happen during a total lunar eclipse, when the moon passes through Earth's shadow. The shadow turns the moon a rusty red color, which is usually nicknamed a blood moon, making this a super blood moon. This will also be the second full moon in the same month, aka a blue moon. So what you'll see Wednesday is a super blue blood moon, the first in 150 years.
Luke. The full moon on January 31st is going to be extra special. A combination of circumstances means a super blue blood moon will appear in the sky. Oh, And also, a total lunar eclipse will take place at the same time. So let's break down this rare astronomical phenomenon. We all know what a full moon is. It means the moon rises at sunset and sets at sunrise. The moon will also be closer to the Earth on that night, making it appear larger than usual. That's what makes it a supermoon. Aside from being a supermoon, it will also be a blue moon because it's the second full moon in January, and that is unusual. There are roughly 29.5 days between full moons, so it's not common for 2 full moons to fit into a 30 or 31 day month. When it happens, a moon is called a blue moon. It's not going to look blue or anything, that's just the name. It's uncommon once in a blue moon. All of this coincides with a lunar eclipse, which happens when a full moon lines up perfectly with the Earth and the sun. The Earth's shadow totally blocks the sunlight, which would normally reflect off of the moon, and then the totally eclipsed moon appears reddish in color, which is why some people actually call it a blood moon. You'll be able to see it as the moon sets. The eclipse will be partial in the eastern US, but on the west coast, you'll be able to see more of the show, and actually Hawaii can see the whole thing. The last time a super blue blood moon eclipse happened was in 1886. So in other words, this has been 150 years in the making.
March the 1st, 2018. 1 month later, Putin threatens the West, the USA, under the reborn Roman Empire, fulfilling the prophecy that nations shall rise against nations, kingdoms and against kingdoms.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. I want to talk to you about something very serious, because I think in the midst of all this foolishness about gun control, we've got something much, much more dangerous. Some years ago, during the Reagan administration, the Lord spoke to me very clearly, and he said, communism will fall in the Soviet Union, but then Russia will be the most dangerous. Well, I saw it fall, I announced it, and people kind of look at you like, oh, you're crazy, and it happened. But we haven't seen the danger yet. But today, Vladimir Putin has announced that the Soviets have nuclear missiles capable of going 20 times the speed of sound. He has got water-launched drones that are nuclear-powered. He has cruise missiles that are nuclear-powered. He has weapons that he said cannot be intercepted. Now, in the old days, the old guys that ran the Soviet Union understood the United States had overwhelming force, and that we had what was called mutually assured destruction. It was called MAD. And we knew that we could destroy them and that they had enough military nuclear weapons to destroy us. But nobody in the recent years has actually talked about nuclear war. This man has talked about nuclear war. And he says his missile defense would make NATO defense useless.
Well, Putin made his announcement in a televised speech, and he said one of his new weapons has practically unlimited range. Gary Lane brings us the story.
The Russian president announced his country has developed a new array of more powerful strategic weapons, some that cannot be intercepted. Putin talked of the new missile arsenal during his State of the Russian Union speech. Among the missiles developed, a new ballistic rocket called the Sarmat.
Sarmat is a very powerful, mighty weapon. Due to its characteristics, even prospective anti-ballistic missile systems would not be an obstacle for it.
The power, range, and number of warheads the Sarmat rocket can carry far exceeds the previous generation of Russian long-range missiles. Also developed are a new nuclear-powered cruise missile and a nuclear-powered underwater drone that Putin says would be immune from enemy intercept. Defense experts say, if true, the technological breakthroughs may dramatically increase Russian military capabilities and possibly lead to a new global arms race. Gary Lane, CBN News.
Ladies and gentlemen, the old guys that used to run Russia wouldn't think of going to war with America. Putin feels threatened, but he is a psychopath, and he would be willing to risk war. We're talking about something very serious. And I want you to know the Lord spoke to me about it years and years ago. And I want to repeat it. Communism would fall in the Soviet Union. And it did. It fell. You remember Gorbachev, Glasnost, and all that stuff. It fell.
On March the 1st, President Putin announced a new generation of weapons vastly superior to anything developed around the world.
У России такое оружие есть.
A hypersonic system, an ICBM with unlimited range, weapons that can fly through dense layers of the atmosphere, a nuclear-powered cruise missile, underwater drones, a unique combat laser complex. That got everyone talking about an arms race and that deadly Russian missile. But from Russia's point of view, it's the one that feels threatened and wants to restore nuclear parity. So how does that work? And what did Putin mean when he said,
Нас никто не слушал. Послушайте сейчас.
To be clear, nuclear parity came as a result of an arms race. It was provoked by the first and so far only nuclear strike in history, when the US dropped atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki in 1945. Estimates put the total number of casualties at up to 450,000. By 1949, the USSR had its own nuclear weapon ready. By 1952, the US tested the first thermonuclear device. A year later, the Soviet Union followed suit. Both sides began to develop ballistic missiles in an attempt to get ahead of each other. The US installed nuclear weapons in Turkey, and the USSR put missiles in Cuba. It was followed by the Cuban crisis, which saw the world teeter on the brink of nuclear war, until Moscow and Washington realized there could be no winners. That's when the period of détente came about. By the early 1990s, it seemed the tension between the two countries was over. It was a time of promises, although some would prove empty over time. NATO famously promised Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev that it would not move an inch to the east.
Даже такие были выражения, как это было у Бейкера, госсекретаря, что мы и на 10 сантиметров не двинемся в интересах НАТО или что-то.
Recently declassified documents on the 1990 negotiations proved Russia's account is accurate.
If we maintain a presence in a Germany that is part of NATO, there would be no extension of NATO's jurisdiction for forces of NATO 1 inch to the east.
There would be no effort to exclude anyone, and there would be no step taken at this time to push anyone ahead of others.
In 1994, the US changed its mind about expanding east.
We're going to move forward on this, but I'd never spring this on you.
But over the past 18 years, NATO's been joined by Hungary, Poland, the Czech Republic, Bulgaria, Romania, Slovakia, Albania, Croatia, Montenegro, as well as the former Soviet republics of Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia. NATO is now at Russia's doorstep. Here is an online meme on how Russia moved its country too close to NATO's military bases. Furthermore, the US moved its missile defenses closer to Russia's borders, another promise broken by Washington. In 2002, the US pulled out of the ABM treaty signed decades before when the Soviet Union was still in place. What is missile defense? It enables one party to launch its own missiles and intercept any counterstrike. It could guarantee victory in a potential war. Of course, NATO and the US say their missile defenses are not against Russia, but against Iran and North Korea. But the locations tell another story. Missile defense installations were placed in Poland, Romania, California, and Alaska. They're also planned for Japan and South Korea. Missile defense ships patrol the seas close to Russian territory.
Создаются системы, элементы систем противоракетной обороны, что нас очень беспокоит, и мы постоянно об этом говорим в течение 10 лет. Это разрушает стратегический баланс в мире.
The balance is disrupted, and Russia, which hasn't ramped up its missile defenses like the US, is facing a deadly danger.
Вы же все понимаете, о чем идет речь. Чего молчите-то? Вы все молчите. Ситуация усугубляется, ведь это подталкивает гонку вооружений, новый виток создает. Это же очевидная вещь. Вот мы все время думаем, а как ответить? Мы думаем, мы совершенствуем систему, значит, преодоления систем противоракетной обороны. Вот это и есть виток гонки вооружений.
Russia says it was forced to come up with a weapon capable of bypassing missile defenses in order to restore nuclear parity. The Kinjal MiG-31 can launch hypersonic missiles that can travel at more than 10 times the speed of sound. Thanks to that and their unpredictable trajectory, they are unstoppable. It's an unrivaled weapon. The US doesn't plan to test its hypersonic weapon until 2019. The Avangard hypersonic vehicle can fly at up to 20 times the speed of sound. An ICBM will take it to an altitude of several dozen kilometers, from where it can dive headfirst back to Earth at top speed with aircraft-like maneuverability, dodging any missile defenses. In contrast, when other existing ballistic missiles re-enter the atmosphere, they fly at a preset trajectory, making them easy targets for ABM systems. Sarmat might seem like an ordinary ICBM, but its range is much longer. The legendary Topol-M missiles can only take the shortest route through the ABM systems. Sarmat can travel via the North or the South Pole where there's no missile shield, and it will still hit its target. But most importantly, Sarmat is a heavy missile capable of carrying more than 20 warheads. That's 5 times more than previous generation missiles. The Budovestnik nuclear-powered cruise missile is a unique weapon. It's basically the same as an American Tomahawk. Whereas the Tomahawk's range is limited to 2,500 kilometers because of fuel constraints, Russia's new missile can fly indefinitely. It can take any path to avoid missile defenses. Just like Poseidon underwater drones. Similar to the regular drones we're used to, except these are submarine launched and travel at incredible speeds towards their targets under the sea. They run so deep that no equipment can track them. Even if detected, their high speed prevents them from being intercepted. The new weapons can work together to neutralize any existing missile defense systems. Kinjal can destroy ground-based ABM systems. Poseidon drones take care of those at sea. Then, the Sarmat, Avangard and cruise missiles can be launched towards their target, bypassing any remaining barriers. On top of that, there's also a combat laser complex, PERSIA, which is unique because it almost instantly delivers an energy beam to a target and has an unlimited battle reserve. Developing new weapons is not a belligerent move, rather a move to restore parity. Perhaps this time the call for a balance of force and fair treatment all round will be heard.
Нас никто не слушал. Послушайте сейчас.
Sixth Seal, the Great Tribulation. 01/02 2018 ADTD 08 2021 AD. On the 31 of January and on 01/02/2018. Was a super blue blood moon entering the Great Tribulation as the beginning is marked by the sun turning dark and the moon turn red, a lunar eclipse. 1 month later, Vladimir Putin announced his new nuclear weapons to restore nuclear parity. Then 1 year later have entered a period of time like the Cold War between the USA versus Russia and China, with the nuclear arms control treaties collapsing. Seventh Seal. DD 08 2021 Kingdom of God declared.